Hello everyone! Today I'm going to show you how to create Kubernetes cluster with full observability on AWS. To do it, we will be using ArchFormation platform. Let's start by creating project. Let's select a name for it. I will call this one EKS. Let's click Next until we get to Template section. So let's select one. Okay, this one will suit us best. Let's click on Create Project. Now, once our project is created, we can start examining what resources will be deployed in AWS. First of all, VPC will be created. Let's see its configuration. If everything suits us well, we can continue to other resources. So, inside VPC, two subnets will be created, public subnet and private subnet. So, in the public subnet, we will have our elastic load balancer. We can see its configuration here. This one is a network load balancer, and it's internet-facing. This will give us an ability to access our Grafana dashboard. Next, we can move to our private subnet. In it, our Kubernetes cluster will be created. We can see its configuration here. Inside this cluster, we will have three namespaces created. One for our applications, one for logging, and the other one for monitoring. Inside monitoring namespace, Grafana and OpenTelemetry will be created. Let's examine Grafana application. We can see that it will be using Prometheus as its data source. And here are a couple of dashboards that will be pre-created for us. We will see it once our cluster is deployed. Let's click on Cancel and move to the infrastructure configuration. So first of all, we will need to enter the account ID. Let's select a name for it. I will call this one prod. And I will be using ID of my account. Next, let's select the region where our infrastructure will be provisioned. Let's click on US East 1 for this one and update the configuration. Now let's move to the structure. In this tab, you are able to see how code for your infrastructure will be structured. Also here, you can configure some specific parameters for different environments. Let's click on EKS to see more. For example, you can add specific users for each environment, or select the instance size for your cluster. We are going to leave everything as default and click on Get Code. Now you can either add your GitHub token to have your code uploaded to your GitHub account, or just keep it and receive everything as a zip archive. I'm going to add my token. Let's select the one I've added before and click on Submit. The build process has started. I will pause the video for a moment until everything is completed. Now the build is completed and we can go to GitHub account to see what was actually created. Here it is. This is my GitHub account and a new repo named EKS is now added to it. Let's switch to Visual Studio Code and configure everything as shown in the documentation. I have cloned my repo and now we can see what code was actually added. Let's check our EKS stack. So, here we have definitions for all add-ons that will be installed on our Kubernetes cluster. If we move to main, you can see the definition for Kubernetes cluster itself. If we go to networking, we will be able to see all the definitions for our VPC and VPC subnet resources. Everything pre-created for us with ArchFormation. Now let's switch to README and see how exactly can we provision all of it. First of all, we will need to build our container, which will have all the necessary dependencies to provision our infrastructure. Let's copy this command and start the building process. I will pause the video for a minute until everything is done. Now we can see that our container was built, and we are free to go to the next step. I have previously exported my AWS credentials, so we can start our container using this command. You can either export your credentials as shown in the documentation or inside container itself. Let's start it. Okay, now we are inside the container. To start the deployment, we will need to run following command and select the environment where we want to deploy everything. We have created environment prod, so I will be entering it. Okay, and let's start. This will deploy all the resources defined in the code. I will stop the video until everything is completed. So now deployment is completed and we can go to our AWS console and see what was actually created. Now I am in my AWS console and let's find Grafana service inside Kubernetes resources. I will go to services. Let's enter here Grafana. Here it is, Grafana service. And let's see where was it deployed. Here it's URL and the port number is 300. In this setup we didn't configure any certificates, so our Grafana will be accessible only under HTTP. Here you can see URL of our load balancer and under port 3000 Grafana is running. Let's retrieve admin login and password. Let's navigate to the resources section in our Kubernetes cluster, open config and secrets, navigate to secrets, enter here Grafana, and here we see Grafana admin credentials. Let's decrypt it. Okay, the username is admin and password is the following. And let's log in. Here you can see that Grafana is completely functioning and running. Let's check what dashboards were created. Here you can see information about pods that are running on your Kubernetes cluster, how much CPU is configured for them, and how much memory is provisioned. Also, here is information for CPU utilization. At this point, you are free to expand this setup as much as you want. You can add some more metrics, other dashboards, or provision some services on your Kubernetes cluster and add them to Grafana too. Now we can move on to removing our infrastructure. To clean up your environment after you finished working with it, just run the following command. Add the environment name you have selected during setup. In our case, it was prod. Now you can see that removal process has started. Thank you for your attention. I hope you will be using ArchFormation in the future.